Coming up on Bridge City News, a protest against an unsanctioned injection site in our city took place at Lethbridge City Hall. Concerns for Alberta horse owners as the virus is making its way through various farms and ranches. And wildfires continue to rage in many parts of California, making 2020 the worst wildfire season in the state's history.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. A protest took place in front of Lethbridge City Hall today by residents who are upset that former employees of Arches have been setting up an unsanctioned injection site at various downtown locations. As Naveen Day explains, this is a complex situation which may not be going away anytime soon.
Outside City Hall, protesters gathered to voice objection to an illegal pop-up overdose prevention site that appeared in various parts of the city over the weekend. A statement provided by Mayor Chris Spearman clashed with what protest organizer Mike Kaufman had to say regarding police intervention.
Lethbridge Police Services has the responsibility to ensure no illegal activity is taking place. We understand they have been monitoring the sites at their different locations but have not witnessed any illegal consumption. They will continue to do this to make sure there is no illegal activity.
To have our Lethbridge City Police Force turning a blind eye to these circumstances when we brought it to their attention each night when they've set up these tents, to not enforce this bylaw 5651. Does that mean I can go down the road and speed? Does that mean that the mask bylaw that you're all wearing doesn't exist anymore? What bylaws apply, what don't?
Lethbridge East MLA Nathan Newdorf says the city and police should be taking the matter more seriously. However, Mayor Spearman says the pop-up site is an indication of a larger problem that exists in the city's drug crisis.
The lack of support services and long-term treatment is really manifesting itself in our city. We need supported housing. So we had that project approved for $11.1 million, but still hasn't started construction. We need about 4 of those in order to accommodate homeless people in our city and people with addiction issues.
The well-being and safety of the citizens of Lethbridge has always been the priority for our government. This illegal site contravenes the Criminal Code of Canada, and we expect the City of Lethbridge and the Lethbridge Police Service to enforce the law.
For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day.
The Community Issues Committee met today to discuss the unsanctioned injection site. It's set up by members of the group calling themselves the Lethbridge Overdose Prevention Society. Lethbridge City Councillor Blaine Hagan says he was not happy with the way this injection site was handled. He says it's an illegal tent setup that should have been removed.
We've got a bylaw, and we're supposed to enforce our bylaws. And so I think obviously when we have there's a tent that's been erected, there's no permit that was received for it, so it should be removed. And I'm just confused on why that's not the case. And so I'll look more into it and I'll get a better explanation from our city manager. But right now I'm still quite confused on it.
Higgins says he spent both Saturday and Sunday on the phone with those who expressed their concerns surrounding the new injection site. Depression and mental health issues are a big topic of discussion these days, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. The Canadian Mental Health Association in Southern Alberta is offering programs and services to help during difficult times. The group has a crisis line for people who may be in distress and community links for those looking to connect with services for help. David Gobbert from the CMHA says they don't base their services on any sort of formal diagnosis, but are here to help during difficult times.
We let people identify if they say it's a crisis to them, it's a crisis to us, and we'll take it just as seriously. We're not going to define what crisis means for individuals, but we'll support people and triage them and try and get them the support they need. We're definitely seeing more anxiety, more stress in the community, which leads into other things such as depression and other mental illnesses. As we're coming up on Mental Illness Awareness Week next week, actually. We're definitely aware that there are people who are suffering through, but also people who are thriving with these chronic mental illnesses.
More information on the CMHA programs can be found on their website. The world has changed with the COVID-19 pandemic. Businesses have closed and millions around the world have been self-isolating. Graham Bretherick is a registered psychologist and president of Run Free Ministries in Lethbridge. Bretherick says during times like these, it's very important to trust God.
If you become worried and anxious, use that as the first signal. I'm not trusting. I'm not really trusting God. My faith has to work for me. If it's not real, what is it really? It's religion.
Catch the full interview with psychologist Graham Bretherick discussing the best ways of dealing with anxiety during the COVID-19 pandemic. That's coming up in the second half of our program. Alberta Health Services has confirmed 12 additional cases of COVID-19 at the Calgary Foothills Hospital as an outbreak there continues. There are 5 more patient cases, which brings that total number to 25. Now that includes 7 new cases among healthcare workers. The outbreak began on 1 unit a week ago, but officials say there are now 5 affected units at the hospital. Our province's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Dean Henshaw, says there are currently 1,549 active COVID-19 cases in Alberta. There have been 406 new cases since Friday, along with 4 new deaths. Henshaw also offered an update as to the virus making its way through our schools.
As of today, AHS has confirmed that 20 schools that previously had alerts have had no transmission, and students and staff are all now back in class. There are active alerts or outbreaks in 113 schools, which is about 5% of the schools in the province. There are currently 210 active cases in total at all of these schools.
As for active COVID-19 cases in the South Zone, there are currently 38. Edmonton still leads the province with 779. Calgary's next with 575 active cases. Caregivers are an essential part of everyday living for millions of Canadians. It's an intense and high-stress job with many rewarding moments, but also some unrewarding moments as well. We recently spoke with Peter Rosenberger, host of the weekly radio show Hope for the Caregiver, who says in many instances caregivers have a hard time separating themselves from the ones they care for and need to remember to self-care.
Ask a caregiver, how are you doing? They say, well, she had a bad night, or I'm not doing, she had a bad night, or he's had a bad night, or we're not doing so well. They struggle with saying I. And so what I do on my show, when I have a caller that calls, it's a live show, and I always ask, how are you feeling? And it's amazing how many times they have to start and reposition again to be able to go back and say, I'm tired, I'm scared, I'm just hacked off.
Catch the full interview with Peter Rosenberger and BCN's Jeanette Rocher coming up in the second half of our program. Imagine waking up every day in constant pain. Now that's the reality for many in our country, including one Lethbridge woman. This is Chronic Pain Awareness Month. As Ainsley O'Reilly explains, those who struggle with chronic pain want people to know that they're not alone in their struggles.
Sydney Abels was born with a rare connective tissue disorder called Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome. Her pain is unpredictable and constant.
The hardest dislocations are my hip, my shoulder, and my rib. Sometimes when I'm walking or going upstairs, my hip will completely pop out of place and I will fall to the floor. And the hardest part is getting that joint back in place because it causes such excruciating pain, and then your muscles spasm, and then your mind goes into like panic mode, and it's very hard to get that joint back into place.
Sydney has lived an extraordinary health journey, having lost 100 pounds in the last 4 years. She works as a nutritionist and focuses on a holistic health approach when it comes to the colossal task of managing her pain.
If I can get up and get out of bed and focus on all the things that I love about my life, the things that I'm grateful for, the positive aspects of my life that I want to focus on, I'm going to be so much happier for that.
She's in a lot of discomfort a lot of the time, but manages to stay positive, manages to stay courteous and polite and pleasant and along those lines. And that's not always the case when people are in pain all the time.
But that's not who they are. That's a small part of who they are, and happens to affect, maybe their physical abilities, or maybe mental or cognitive abilities sometimes. But who they are is much wider and bigger than that.
Abel says that she wakes up in the morning with a purpose, a mission to educate others and help the 1 in 5 Canadians who are dealing with chronic pain, just like her.
When I share my journey, people open up to me and tell me about their chronic pain journeys, and they tell me the things that I've shared with my journey that have helped them in their journey, and that gives me meaning every day to get up and go through the pain that I live in. We are not alone, and I think that it's super important for us to not feel alone and to share our stories.
For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
Friends and family of a 59-year-old pilot who died in a plane crash near Thorsby over the weekend say he will be remembered for his involvement in the industry for over 2 decades. Ken Fowler and his 48-year-old female passenger died after the Harmon rocket sport plane went down in a field northwest of the town on Saturday. Friends of Fowler say that some of the woman's family still has not been informed of her death. The Transportation Safety Board is investigating the crash. Fall is a beautiful time of year, especially with the leaves changing color. However, we know what's following, and that's winter with lots of snow. Canadian ski operators are getting ready for a season where they'll have to protect their guests from COVID-19. Resort owners say skiers and snowboarders will have to wear masks on lifts, gondolas, or when indoors. Physical distancing will also be encouraged by removing tables and chairs in restaurants. Medical experts say there's little chance of catching the virus, however, while flying through the powder on the ski hill. Horse owners and veterinarians in our province are on alert after an outbreak of Potomac horse fever. It's a virus that causes death in up to 30% of its cases. It causes major health issues after horses ingest snails, slugs, and insects in their food.
Potomac horse fever is really something that we see sporadically throughout the summer months usually, and it's something that is very regionally distributed. So Alberta tends to have a fair number during the summer months, usually August, September, July, I guess it starts. And then it peters out through the winter, and that really goes to the life cycle of the bacteria that we're dealing with. And it really has to do with the insects that carry that bacteria. And so we know that in our population here, we get aquatic insects, so snails, caddisflies, mayflies. If you're within kind of 7 kilometers of a water source, you can have increased number of those insects, and then our animals are at a higher risk of becoming infected.
You know, he just seemed a little low energy, which could have been so many things. And then one day he didn't want to eat in the morning, so which is very unusual for him. So we got him, it took us a little while to get a hold of a vet. We managed to speak to someone that afternoon, and as soon as I said he had diarrhea and was off his appetite, and he had a cough as well, which doesn't typically fit the profile, but it was concerning for us, and he was just off. So we got him in that afternoon, and by that stage, he was having some pretty significant diarrhea and was very dehydrated.
The province announced today that crop yields are estimated to hit a new record high in Alberta, with farmers harvesting more than 7% above what is normal. Livestock markets are also set to reach a new record high of almost $7 billion. Government officials say the food processing sector in Alberta is expected to hit a new record, with products totaling close to $15 billion. Now, in a statement, Alberta Agriculture Minister Devin Dreeshen said this today: Alberta has a proud history of resilient, innovative farmers, food processors, and ranchers who have overcome some of the toughest conditions. From our world-famous Alberta beef to high-quality, hardy red spring wheat, Alberta's agriculture sector is an economic highlight during these tough times. Ontario's Premier says his province is experiencing a second wave of COVID-19. Doug Ford says the 700 new cases reported in Ontario today are the highest recorded daily increase since the start of the pandemic. But he says Ontario can control the outcome of the wave by following public health rules. He says more nurses and personal support workers will help address the virus. Quebec officials conceded that their province was in a second wave last week. Federal Government House Leader Pablo Rodriguez says Canadians are watching closely to see if federal political parties will work together to quickly pass the Liberals' latest COVID-19 economic recovery package. Rodriguez has proposed to limit debate on the bill that could see it passed very soon if the other parties agree. The relief programs include more flexibility to qualify for employment insurance and 3 new benefits for Canadians who will not qualify for EI but are still impacted by the economic crisis generated by the pandemic. Capping a dramatic reshaping of the federal judiciary, U.S. President Donald Trump has nominated a successor to Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Trump is hoping that his nomination of conservative judge Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court will boost his re-election chances.
She is a woman of unparalleled achievement, towering intellect, sterling credentials, and unyielding loyalty to the Constitution, Judge Amy Coney Barrett.
I love the United States, and I love the United States Constitution. I am truly humbled by the prospect of serving on the Supreme Court. Should I be confirmed, I will be mindful of who came before me. The flag of the United States is still flying at half-staff in memory of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg to mark the end of a great American life. Justice Ginsburg began her career at a time when women were not welcome in the legal profession. But she not only broke glass ceilings, she smashed them.
Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden says the fate of the Affordable Care Act is at stake with Trump's nomination to the Supreme Court. Justices are scheduled to hear another challenge of the 2010 health care law on November the 10th.
There's no mystery about what's happening here. President Trump is trying to throw out the Affordable Care Act. He's been trying to do it for the last 4 years. President Trump can claim all he wants he's going to protect people with pre-existing conditions. But the fact is he's already fighting to take those protections away as we speak. The judge has a written track record of disagreeing adamantly with the Supreme Court's decisions on 2 occasions upholding the ACA.
A new wildfire that broke out Sunday in Napa Valley County, California, has prompted the evacuation of residents. The fire is close to several wineries and has burned over 2 square kilometers. As of September 14th, a total of 7,718 fires have burned around 1.9 million hectares in California. According to state fire officials, that is close to 5% of land in California, making 2020 the largest wildfire season ever recorded in California history. Firefighters are also battling wildfires in central Argentina. Government officials say these are some of the worst fires in more than a decade, and they're going through the country's vast wetlands. Low water levels have exposed carbon-rich soil, which is ripe for burning. Wetlands play a crucial role in mitigating floods and purifying water, so the destruction is a major concern for scientists. The waterlogged ecosystem is home to thousands of species of animals, including the world's largest rodent, the capybara. It was another beautiful fall day in southwestern Alberta. We had sun mixed with clouds and warm temperatures, but it should remain dry. In fact, there's not much rain in the forecast all of this week. Full weather details are coming up. We had lots of cloud cover today and hit the 20-degree mark once again in Lethbridge. Tonight, it should be mainly clear with a low near 10. Tomorrow it should be mainly sunny with a high expected near 23. Wednesday, cooling off just a little bit under mainly clear sky and a high of 17. Thursday, sunshine and warm again up to 23 degrees. Clear sky and 22 on Friday. A beautiful weekend is shaping up as well. Just a few clouds and 25 degrees on Saturday, cloudy and 26 on Sunday. Looking at the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 18 degrees and an average low of 3. The highest temperature on this date was recorded in 1967 at 30 degrees, and the record low was -6 in 1965. Sunrise was at 7:27, sunset at 7:16. Looking at tomorrow's national forecast now, Victoria, BC should be mainly sunny with a high of 22. Just a few clouds and 20 is on tap for Vancouver. Lots of sunshine and 18 for Calgary on Tuesday. A chance of rain and 17 degrees for Edmonton. A mixture of sun and cloud and 18 for Regina tomorrow. Just a few clouds and 17 for Saskatoon. A slight chance of rain and 17 degrees as well for Winnipeg. Overcast and 17 for Toronto on Tuesday. Expect showers and 17 degrees for Ottawa. Rain and 20 degrees for Montreal. In the Maritimes, expect rain and 25 for Fredericton, New Brunswick. Showers and 22 for Halifax, Nova Scotia. A slight chance of showers and 25 for Charlottetown, PEI. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, expect a mainly overcast day and a high near 22 for tomorrow. U.S. President Donald Trump says he's issuing a presidential permit for the A2A cross-border rail project that would run from Alaska into northern Alberta. The proposed 2,570-kilometer track would transport oil, grain, ore, and other containerized goods. The company will need to go through a U.S. review process. Environmental assessments from Ottawa and the provinces are also needed. A spokesperson for Premier Jason Kenney says the government supports the development of trade corridors that can unlock new markets for Alberta's products. Calgary-based Interpipeline has inked a deal to acquire the Milk River pipeline system from a subsidiary of Plains All-American Pipeline. In exchange, Plains gets 100% ownership interest in the Empress 2 and 50% ownership interest in the Empress 5 straddle plants. The Milk River pipeline system includes two 16-kilometer pipelines, which pumps out around 90,000 barrels a day. It also connects Interpipeline's Bow River pipeline system from Milk River, Alberta, to the Canada-US border. Stats Canada says around 20% of all businesses that closed in March or April at the start of COVID-19 had reopened by June. The agency says it recorded around 56,300 closures for the month. The number was an improvement from May, but still 44% more than in February before the health crisis struck full force in Canada. Amazon says around 3,500 new corporate and tech jobs will be available as it opens and expands 2 facilities in both British Columbia and Ontario. The online retailer says the vast majority, or around 3,000 jobs, will be based in Vancouver, as it adds 63,000 square meters to its office at the Post Building. Amazon will also add another 500 new workers in Toronto in its new downtown office tower. Amazon says the corporate and tech jobs will include software development engineers, user experience designers, and speech scientists working to make Alexa smarter. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 177 points today to 16,243. The Dow was up 410 points to 27,584. The S&P 500 was up 53 points to 3352, and the Nasdaq was up 203 points to 11,118. Oil was up 32 cents to $40.57 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 4 cents to $2.10 US. Gold was up a cent to $18.81 US an ounce, and silver was unchanged on the day at $23.67 US an ounce. Wheat is at $240 per metric ton, barley's at $237, canola's at $5.15, and corn is at $260 per metric ton. Live cattle were up 25 cents to $111.65, feeder cattle were up 60 cents to $140.93, and lean hogs were down 40 cents to $64.03. The Canadian dollar was down slightly on the day to $74.78 US.
Today's market numbers are brought to you by The Meat Box, your local butcher where quality matters.
Recapping one of our top stories of this hour, a protest took place at Lethbridge City Hall by those concerned about an unsanctioned injection site being set up in our city's downtown core. Protesters were upset with a newly formed group called the Lethbridge Overdose Prevention Society, led by former Arches employees, who have been setting up a makeshift tent site, saying the province is not doing enough to prevent overdose deaths. When you see news happening, make sure you drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. And if you missed any of today's stories, check out our full newscast online at bridgecitynews.ca or on our YouTube channel. Caregivers are an essential part of our lives, especially when we get older. Coming up, we chat with Peter Rosenberger, host of the weekly radio program Hope for the Caregiver, who says in many instances, caregivers have a hard time separating themselves from those they care for and need to remember to self-care. That Q&A with Jeanette Roche is on deck. But first, here's a look what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News Community Calendar. Get to know your city and take part in the Lethbridge Scavenger Hunt. Download the Let's Roam Scavenger Hunt app, lace up your walking shoes, and head out with family to discover the best landmarks in Lethbridge. Put your navigation skills to the test while enjoying the journey at your own pace. No reservations, no tour guides, and fun for all ages. Visit letsroam.com/scavenger hunt. Bring your lunch and enjoy beautiful live music at the same time. Bring your lunch and enjoy beautiful live music at the same time. Come out October 2nd to the First Friday Lunch and Listen concert series featuring performances by the University of Lethbridge Conservatory of Music in Cass's Community Room beginning 12:15 p.m. and ending at 1. First Friday events are an initiative brought to you by the Heart of Our City Committee. For a full listing of upcoming events, visit firstfridaylethbridge.com. Go back in time and see what it was like to live as a pioneer. Coyote Flats Pioneer Village is a Western heritage museum located 1.5 kilometers south of Pitcher Butte. Walk through the village and see a railway station, post office, fire hall, school, and so much more. The museum is open daily from 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. with admission of $10 for adults or $20 per family. Mobility scooters are available to guests by donation. For more information, visit coyoteflats.org. And that's your Bridge City News Community Calendar.
Caregivers are an essential part of everyday living for millions of Canadians. It's an intense, high-stress job with many rewarding moments. Today's guest has personal experience in this area, and he's cared for his beautiful wife, Gracie, who lives with severe disabilities for 33 plus years. He is the host of the weekly radio show, Hope for the Caregiver, president of Standing with Hope, and author of the book, Hope for the Caregiver. Peter Rosenberger, welcome to the show. It's so great to have you on today.
It is a treat to be with you all.
So, Peter, tell us, how many people are caregivers in the United States? And I believe you have statistics on Canada as well.
Well, it's a hard number to actually quantify because a lot of times they talk about caregivers for those who are caring for the aging, senior citizens and so forth, and that's about a 42 million number in America. But then you throw in special needs children, then you throw in mentally ill, then you throw in what I do on my show and what I talk about, alcoholics and addicts. That alcoholism and addiction is a chronic impairment. Even if you're in recovery, you're still dealing with that impairment. And anybody that's in the orbit of that individual, they know that individual is chronically impaired. And that wherever you find somebody who's chronically impaired, you're going to find a caregiver. So most experts in the United States are hovering around that 65 million range for the family caregiver in the United States. And in Canada, it's 8 to 11 million. Again, it's hard to quantify that number because a lot of people don't identify as such. They don't think of themselves as a caregiver. I did a whole bit a couple of years ago with comedian Jeff Foxworthy on You Might Be a Caregiver If. Wow. And, you know, if you've ever hooked up your wife's wheelchair to your dog just to see if it would work, you're probably a caregiver. I mean, that's, I was trying to do something that would kind of make people think of a little bit different about that. And it's okay to laugh at that, by the way. That's funny. And, if you get more than 6 Christmas cards from a doctor, you're probably a caregiver, So people don't think of themselves as such. And I'm helping reframe that conversation so people understand, why is this important? What am I doing here? Where's this going? And how do I do it better or safer?
Yeah. Now, you are a caregiver yourself. Let's talk about how you became one and what has the journey been like for you?
Well, I became one when I said I do, and then I did, because my wife was hurt several years before I even met her. She had a really bad car wreck when she was a teenager, 17 years old. She had the world by the tail. And she was at school, at a music school in Nashville, Tennessee. I was at a different school in South Carolina at the time. Didn't know her. I transferred in as she was recuperating after the wreck. She came back, and friends said, "You got to meet this girl." And they said she's had a really bad wreck, but you guys are going to really hit it off. And she's the most spunky girl. You talked to her yesterday. She is. She's got a personality as big as the state we live in, which is Montana, and beautiful, beautiful young gal. I mean, when I saw her, I was, don't take my word for it, Google her. I was Googling her that day. We didn't even have Google back then. and then I heard her sing, and I was a pianist. She's a singer, and it was all over at that point, and I knew I was going to take care of her. She had a limp. I saw some scars on her lower legs at first, and I knew that she'd had some tough times, but had no concept of what this meant. She'd had about 20 surgeries by the time I met her in the mid-'80s. We got married, and the doctor said, look, if you guys are going to have kids, you have them when you're young. And so I went to her and I said, baby, doctor says we got to do this. And I got a prescription and everything. And I don't know if that's covered under Obamacare, but I bet you that's covered under Clinton care. So we had 2 children, but it accelerated some of that's funny, by the way. Y'all could laugh at that. That is just really funny. And y'all should laugh harder. But we had our sons, and after each son, she gave up one of her legs. It just accelerated the damage that was going on with her crushed limbs. The surgeries just kept mounting. To date that I could count, she's had 80 that I can count, and about another 150 smaller procedures. She's been treated by over 100 doctors in 12 different hospitals, and the bill is now well over 11 million. It just keeps growing. It's really kind of hard to keep track of all of it. I'm ballparking on that one, and that's a low ballpark. So she lives with severe pain all the time, and not known a day without it since Reagan was president in his first term. So that's a long time to deal with disability and challenges and heartache and frustration. And I've come to understand where the real battle is for the family caregiver. And it's and this is why I wrote the book. This is why I did the show. This is why I'm here with you today, because I understand how dark and discouraging those places can be when you're having a late night conversation with the ceiling fan, thinking, "Oh Lord, what am I going to do?" And so that's my story.
Yeah, it's unbelievable what you two have been through, and I can see that you use humor a lot, which is great. It's a great coping
Well, I
mechanism.
like to call it humor.
Yeah.
From your reaction, I was unclear if it was humor, but some things don't translate to Canada. I don't know. I don't know what that's all about.
Don't worry about it. Everyone will get it. Okay, so obviously you've got a lot of experience in this. What kind of advice can you give to those who might recognize that they could eventually become a caregiver, possibly to like aging parents? Is there anything that they can do to plan for it?
Yes. First off, if you love somebody, you will probably be a caregiver. If you live long enough, you're probably going to need one. So we all got a stake in this. It's a slow, creeping reality that we don't think about because we're always so busy right here in the here and now. But there's several things you can do to prepare for this. One of them is make sure your home is ready. When you're 50, 60 years old, don't go buy a 3-story home with a whole lot of stairs and the living part is way up on top. Don't do that. That's not a good idea. Make sure that you've got wider doorways, handicap accessible things. We're all one sprained ankle away from being in a tough situation in our own home. So let's go ahead and plan for that. Another thing is we've got to start taking care of ourselves and being good stewards, planning financially, planning physically with our bodies and things such as that, because it is coming. And then if you have a special needs child that comes in, all of a sudden you've brought this child into the world, there are things to prepare for that once that reality hits of what you can do. And but it all starts with the heart. And my message is for caregivers, healthy caregivers make better caregivers. And if you're morbidly obese, how is that going to help you take care of someone else? I see too many people who are really heavy pushing wheelchairs. And I know it. I wrote a book called 7 Caregiver Landmines. Excessive weight gain is one of those. I know. I got so big it took 2 dogs to bark at me. I know. I get it. We reach for the comfort food. That was funny, by the way, too. And it's, I got a million of those. I got so big I broke my family tree. I mean, I got big. And I understand that, but we've got to dial that back in. But the heavy weight that we really carry is not around our waist, it's around our heart. And so what I do is try to speak to that heart of the caregiver to let them know, number one, if you're in this situation right now, which there are millions of people in Canada dealing with this right now, you're in this situation now, hey, you know what? You didn't cause it, you can't cure it.
Yeah.
Okay? Yeah. That's not yours to fix. You're a steward of this. Now, we don't talk about stewardship a lot in our society. I don't know what you guys do up there in Canada, but in America, we're $24 trillion in debt. Stewardship is clearly not on the top of mind of everybody in America. And we got people burning down our cities and everything else. Stewardship is not where our headspace is. But for caregivers, that's where it has to be. It really has to be for all of us, but I'm just going to focus on caregivers. We are stewards of somebody who is suffering or impaired or struggling. We are not owners or fixers. That's the big thing to keep in mind. You can't fix these things. I don't have any power over amputation. My wife's lost both legs, and her body is orthopedically a train wreck. I have no power over that, but I have a lot of power over being a jerk.
Absolutely. That's right.
I got a lot of power over that. And so that's where the battle is for us as caregivers. Can we live peacefully with things that we don't particularly like?
Right. Now, in your book, you use 3 positive words for high stress moments. They are wait, water, and walk. What do you mean by that?
Well, I never have to make amends for something I didn't say. And sometimes we are so quick to blurt out some stuff and we want to jump into it. And for us as caregivers, we're often required to learn to bite our tongue and enjoy the taste of blood, because we want to pop off and say things. Just wait. just breathe. Just take a deep breath, 4 seconds in, 8 seconds out, and calm yourself down. If that's not enough, drink some water. A lot of times we reach for sodas or high sugary drinks or whatever. Please, for all that is good in this world, avoid drinking things like Red Bull as a caregiver. It is not good for you. And we don't need to be so amped up. Our life is like this anyway. So drink some water, drink to think. We need to hydrate, and water gives us a chance to get our blood pressure down. Also, it fills our mouth with something besides words. We don't always have to go to every fight we get a ticket to. They're going to say things that are, or family members are going to say things, or doctors or nurses, or somebody's going to say, pastors, church people come up to you. Well, if you had enough faith, you wouldn't be going through this. Well, they don't say that to me anymore. I'm a second-degree black belt, so I usually know how to deal with that kind of nonsense. And I'm helping help people get better theology in this too, because we got really terrible theology when it comes to suffering. But drink, okay? Just drink. Let me clarify. Drink water. just clarify that.
Don't drink red wine, is what you're saying.
And the last thing is go for a walk if you need to. Weight, water, walk. You don't have to engage on all these things. It's okay to let some of this go.
That's interesting. It's good advice, too. Now, in your book, you also mentioned that there are 6 major impact areas affected by caregiving. What are they?
Well, you got your health, your emotions, your lifestyle, your profession, your money, and your endurance. You put it all together, it says, help me. And that's the cry for us as caregivers. All of these things are affected, but it starts with your heart. If your head and heart are squirrely, guess what? Your wallet will soon follow. If you are a train wreck in your darkest places in your heart, guess what? Your body will soon be that way too. It's just, and so if you can detangle this stuff in the heart, then we give every part of our living existence a fighting chance in dealing with these realities. So that's where I focus, but it's always about help me, not help us, not help her, help me. Mm-hmm. Because if I'm in a good place, my wife, who has all these things going on with her, has a fair shot at having some things help with her. But if I'm in a bad place, what's going to happen to her?
Yeah, it's almost like the caregiver needs a caregiver sometimes, right? It sounds like such a hard job.
I don't give a lot of instruction to my fellow caregivers on the air or anywhere else. What I try to give is reminders, because I think that's where our battle is. You can't tell me how to take care of my wife. I can't tell you how to take care of your family member, but we can remind each other of where safety is. In the Army, sometimes the leader is the guy that remembers where the Jeep is parked, you know? And we can remind each other of where safety is. Have you seen your doctor lately? Have you been to a counselor lately? When's the last time that you went for a walk?
Right. And that's good advice for the caregivers. You also mentioned that there are 3 I's that every caregiver suffers from. What are they?
Every one of us lose their independence, we become isolated, and then we lose our identity. And that loss of identity is such a debilitating thing for family caregivers. Ask a caregiver, how are you doing? They say, well, she had a bad night, or I'm not doing, she had a bad night, or he's had a bad night, or we're not doing so well. They struggle with saying I. And so what I do on my show, when I have a caller that calls, it's a live show, and I always ask, how are you feeling? And it's amazing how many times they have to start and reposition again to be able to go back and say, I'm tired, I'm scared, I'm just hacked off. I don't know what to do. I don't care what comes after the word I. We can have a real conversation at that point, because then they start speaking, and they're probably stuttering, and tears will fill up their eyes. I've seen this over and over and over when they start speaking from their heart. But I try to give them enough space to be able to do that so that they can express what's going on there, get it all on the table. Now let's have a real conversation.
Oh, that's so interesting. And you're absolutely right. You do lose your identity, and you start to take on, almost project your personality onto the other person, or they get projected back onto you. That is so interesting. And it really drives home the fact of how much caregivers need other people in their lives too, right? Like counseling. And I would imagine they suffer from guilt a lot of times, and worry, and just all kinds of stresses.
Guilt really cripples caregivers.
Yeah.
I call it part of the fog of caregivers: fear, obligation, and guilt. And we get lost in the fog.
Yeah.
Parents feel guilty for bringing a child into this world with special needs. You feel guilty if your loved one can't get up and go and just stand up and take a shower. You feel guilty if you can get up and go and walk around the block and they can't. There are a lot of things to feel, not just sins that get great press. There are a lot of things to feel guilty about. You feel guilty if you just want to sit down and watch a television show uninterrupted for an hour.
Wow.
I try to help caregivers work through that a little bit and start using the word grace. I love that word grace. It's my favorite word in the English language. I married a woman named Grace, and I love the word grace. And we've got to learn how to apply that in our own lives so that we can live peacefully with very, very painful things.
Well, Peter Rosenberger, we are out of time, unfortunately. I would love to go on talking to you for hours and hours, and I'm sure you have so much to say on this topic. Thank you so much for joining us today, though.
Thank y'all for having me. I mean, I hope my Southern accent translates over to the North. But thank you. You'll probably use subtitles, but thanks for having me.
Not at all. Thank you so much. That was Peter Rosenberger, president of Standing with Hope and the author of the book, Hope for the Caregiver.
The world has changed with the onset of the coronavirus pandemic. The response to this has really varied from country to country, but it seems the most common response is a high degree of anxiety and worry. Joining me now to talk about it in studio is Graham Bretherick, a registered psychologist, president of Run Free Ministries in Lethbridge, also author of The Fear Shift, Dominated by Fear No More, available at runfreecounseling.com. Graham, welcome back to BCN.
Thank you for inviting me, Hal. Good to be here.
You bet. Now let's talk about COVID-19. A lot of people are impacted by this around the world. Here in Lethbridge, I mean, we have some cases here as well. When was the last time you saw the level of anxiety and fear so high?
Well, I don't think I've ever seen it so high as this. I mean, I'm just a little over 70, and I don't know that I've ever seen it in all of the things we've been through. I mean, I wasn't around when World War I and World War II were, obviously, but I have not seen it this high in a long time, maybe ever.
That's incredible. Yeah. Now, what is the difference between fear and simply really being concerned about something?
Well, no, let me step back. Fear actually has two sides to it. There's positive side of fear, and it's basically a good thing. Without fear, you'd get killed walking across the highway. Without fear, you could get, all kinds of problems. So we need fear to warn us. So fear basically works as a warning signal. However, the fear of fear, which is what I see going on now, I call negative fear. That fear is quite different because we get overwhelmed by the fear.
Okay, how about anxiety?
Well, anxiety is just repressed fear. So if you keep pushing the fear, I don't want to think about it, I don't want to think about it, I don't want to think about it, you push it down, that's what anxiety is.
Some people say maybe the media is paying a little too much attention to COVID-19. But at the same time, the world is taking notice. Right. Thousands of people dying in Italy, not just in China. Right. It's rampant around the world right now. Yes. So we want to be concerned. But is there a point in time when we're going beyond staying informed and maybe pushing negativity?
Yeah. Let me just say this. The positive fear is really faith. All right. That if you look at what it is, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So we need wisdom. That's really an expression of faith. But if you think about what negative fear is, it's really be controlled by the fear of fear. So it depends what you focus on. So I just say this, that faith really has to do with focus. What are you focused on? So if you focus on the television, you focus on all the bad reports and constantly get that, and that's all you're getting, you're going to be fearful and you're going to be overwhelmed by it and you're going to become quite anxious.
With Bridge City News, we also like to include some good stories. Absolutely. When it comes to COVID-19, like there are different volunteer groups in Canada and the United States, they're helping even Holocaust survivors who are shut in their homes and making meals and bringing them meals. So it's nice to see the good things that humanity is doing at the same time, right? And that's pretty important, isn't it?
Yes. Well, you think back to some of the Jewish people who held people in their homes at the danger of their lives. And so why did they do it? Because they believed it was the right thing to do. They had a faith and believed in it was the right thing to do. But they took their lives in their hands in one sense, because if they got caught, they were dead. So I mean, I love the fear that turns into a positive thing, and we do good things because we're not afraid of being overwhelmed by what's happening around us.
Some people like to get their news sources as well from social media.
Yes.
Whether it's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, so forth. Can we spend maybe too much time on social media that may impact our own psyche?
Well, I think we can. Yeah, and again, it's focus. What are you focused on? So if all you read is all the negative stuff, then that starts to overwhelm you. Your emotional system can't actually handle that. You need to put a focus on some good things, some positive things.
Some structure.
Yes.
You know, it's funny because a lot of times we give our kids a certain amount of hours that they could spend maybe on their computers or on social media. Maybe we should do the same for ourselves, discipline ourselves, right?
Well, I watch the news because I want to be alert. I want to keep.
You're watching Bridge City News to see what's going on.
I am watching the news. I watch Bridge City News.
That's right. That's awesome.
So, but I'm also reading my Bible, and I'm also declaring Psalm 91 over my family and over my every day when my wife and I share communion together and we pray together, we read Psalm 91 over us and make that as a declaration. So I'm not living in the fear that I'm going to get COVID-19.
I think it's natural to get scared. A lot of us get scared
Yeah.
for whatever happens, right?
Fear is natural.
So fear will come, but how can we really shift that fear into faith? That trusting God will provide and protect and watch over us?
Just what I've said is that if you don't worship the God who's over all of this, see, worship is a real help that way. And so is reading our Bibles, so is meditating, so is talking with other Christians who have enough faith. So I've been encouraging people in their faith. All right, so that's what I keep doing because what are we focused on again? I come back to it. What are we focused on?
A lot of people are concerned as well with COVID-19, the coronavirus, the novel coronavirus, that it's going to impact a lot of those who already have compromised immune systems, such as our parents and our grandparents. How do we put some of those fears at ease? Because we're really worried about the elderly.
Right. Well, and I think that's the positive side of fear. Be alert. Be smart. You know, be aware that if you're in your 80s, you're going to be more vulnerable than if you're in your 40s or 30s, et cetera. But that focus is a good focus because then we're being smart. Like I think it's good to be careful with how much we're connecting with people. That's smart. But I'm not going to be afraid to go out in public because that would then control me. My fear then controls me. And I don't want that to happen. I want my faith to control me.
Graham, what do you say to people who've lost their jobs because of COVID-19? My daughter's one of them. She was working as a line cook in Ontario. Her restaurant shut down. A lot of people are fearful they're going to lose their jobs. And how are they going to pay their bills? Their rent, their food, or mortgage payments?
Well, again, let me take it back to if God is my provider, and therefore He's going to make provision in these difficult times. I understand the fear. I understand we have to be alert to, and I understand that when we lose our job, we have to start thinking about what we're going to do. But at the same time, I've been through times when we haven't had much money. And so what did I do? Did I get fearful? Sometimes yes. Or did I go back and say, wait a minute now, who's my provider? Am I my own provider or is God my provider? And that's what carried me through. And I shifted my faith again and said, Father, you are my provider. I'm trusting you through this.
You know, sometimes people sit down, and I'm guilty of this myself sometimes. You get on your knees and you pray to your Heavenly Father. He'll provide and protect, and you'll leave it at the foot of the cross.
Right.
Then you get right back up and you take those worries right back from God, right?
Yes, I know.
So how do you get into practice of just leaving those problems at the cross?
Well, I mean, because I think we need constant reminders. We're slow learners, all right? So just constant reminders. Every day, that's what I say, my wife and I are choosing to have communion every day as the focus on the cross. That's what we're doing. And we're just simply saying, you're our protector, you're our provider, you're our peace, and we're going to operate in that. And we need that reminder because it's easy to shift back, whoops, everything else is very frightful out here. So I'm just keeping my focus here. I'm not unaware, I'm not naive about this, but I'm keeping my focus here.
A lot of people as well, Graham, are quite concerned about, you know, the consequences of the anxiousness, you know, maybe being sleepless,
right?
You know, maybe getting stressed out to the point that you have an ulcer perhaps.
Right.
So physiologically speaking, how can you control the anxiousness to the point where you don't make yourself sick?
Well, I think what we probably have to do is talk about it. Like anxiety usually happens because we push it down and we keep it quiet and we don't talk to anybody. It is much better to talk about it, but we're ashamed of our anxiety. We are ashamed of our fear focus. And so we just keep it quiet. And then what happens is it's turmoil inside of us. It's much better to sit down with someone and say, look, I'm afraid. All right, let's talk about it. Let's work it through. Let's pray it through. Let me help you change the focus, which is what we're doing in counseling. We're helping people shift the focus.
How about shift the focus onto something else, like working on a vehicle, doing some gardening, perhaps? Springtime now?
It's a bit premature for gardening.
Well.
But when we come to it,
Right?
that's true. I think
Like
that's
hobbies,
good.
right?
Yes. I think that's a good thing to do, as long as that's not an escapism. You know, like I say, here's what I sense. People are way more full of fear than they realize. And so they push it down, and then something like this comes along, and all of a sudden, whoop, all this stuff comes to the surface. So what I want to do then is learn how to walk this out and work this through so that I actually gain mental health or emotional health through this process.
Do you think as well maybe COVID-19 is a good test of our own faith?
It is.
And our relationship
It
with
is.
God?
I'm saying these days, how real is your faith? Does it work for you or is it religious? In other words, it works on a Sunday morning. I go and I do my Sunday morning thing and I come back, and then the next day on Monday, I'm back to living in worry and fear. By the way, if you're worrying, you're not trusting. If you're anxious, you're not trusting. Those are good signals. If I'm anxious, if I'm worrying, I'm not trusting. I'm not trusting God. So then I can confess that. That's one of the things I'm saying to people. Then just confess it. I'm worried, which means I'm not trusting. I repent. That is, I change my thinking from worrying, I'm going to solve my own problems, to being able to say, I trust you, Father. You are my provider. You're my protector. You're my peace.
How important is it then to really meditate on His Word?
Very important. I do it every day because I can't.
Does that give you that peace that you need then, right?
It does. It does for me. And I realize that sometimes when I'm dealing with counseling and people are quite anxious, I have to keep myself focused back for their sake and my sake on what I really believe. What do I really believe? So I'm reading the Bible with that in mind. Psalm 91, again, I just read that before. That's a really good one. But the other day I was reading in Nehemiah chapter 1 and 2 in my Bible reading, and Nehemiah has to go before the king. If he says the wrong things, off with his head. So he approaches this with prayer, and then he puts action to his prayer, and then tells the king what's going on. Basically, the king says, why are you so down? Why is your face sad? Now, you're not allowed to be in the king's presence and have a sad face, apparently, in those days. But he did it, took a risk, and then God gave an option to be able to tell the king what was going on. His heart was heavy for Jerusalem, etc. But that he faced his fears.
As human beings, do you think we have a tendency to put more faith in our consequences rather than in trusting in God?
Oh, yes.
And that relationship?
Oh, yeah. It's the natural thing is to get focused on the world that I live in and the environment I live in. That's
and woe is me sometimes, a pity party, right?
Yeah, and pity really is a form of pride. You know, that self-pity is a form of pride. So if I'm focused on myself, I'm not walking in humility. And humility basically is saying, I trust you, Father. I trust you to take care of me during these times. These are actually not bad times. From my point of view, they're actually, I'm not being naive when I say that. There's lots going on. But it's great opportunity in the kingdom of God to advance the kingdom of God and say to people, where's your faith? Let me help you with it. Let me come alongside you.
How important is it then, Graham, to really focus on things we should be thankful for?
I like that. I think that's really good, because otherwise you get into a negativity. So look, I've got this to be thankful, this, and you put it helps change the focus, helps change where you
count your blessings, right?
Name them one by one. That's right, the old hymn says, yeah. So it's good, we should be doing that. And we should be encouraging one another along the line, you know, because I know people, I talked to someone the other day who was really quite fearful. And I just said, let me just put a little different shift. And as I did, in about 15 minutes, that person has shifted from a fear focus to a faith focus.
How can we really help our children deal with anxiety?
Talk about it. Worst thing you can do is just be anxious. They pick it up. They sense that. So I just say, talk to your children. Open it up. Are you worried about something? Are you concerned about this? It depends on the age of the child. But I say, what are you worried about? Let's talk about it. That's one of the ways we shift from letting it control us, because we push it down. Because often, again, we feel ashamed, which is hiding. We feel ashamed of our fear. I shouldn't be afraid. I shouldn't be afraid. But fear is a natural emotion. But I just not get caught in it. I don't want to get trapped by it.
I know a lot of times as well as a man, I can be fearful of a situation that I have no control over.
Right.
You know, because a lot of men, it's like we want to be able to control certain things and help our families the best we can. We want to problem solve, get it right in there. But sometimes you can't, and that's what's really difficult. And that can create more anxiousness.
Right.
Right?
Well, we like to stay in control. All of us do. I'm no different than anyone else. I like to stay in control. But I have to realize, basically, I worship a God who's controlling everything. The coronavirus has not caught God off guard. He's not shocked by it. Now, he didn't create it, but he's not caught off guard by it. So then I go back to God, all right, how do I handle in this time? How do I walk this out with faith? How do I become a positive influence instead of a negative influence?
Some people would ask as well, Graham, perhaps non-believers, why would God, your God, allow something like this to happen, to take so many innocent lives? COVID-19.
Well, yeah, it's not like he allows it to happen. It's the result of a sinful world we live in, and all the fear and all the anxiety and all the greed and all the stuff that's going on around us. I mean, that's a result of a fallen world. But God always says, I can turn all things from evil into good. So, that's what Romans 8:28 basically go back to that. God causes all things to work together for good to those who love him and are called according to his purpose. And that's my faith stand. I keep my focus on Jesus.
So Graham, some closing thoughts on a message you want to deliver to seniors who are watching, families who are watching, who are impacted by COVID-19 and are concerned about the novel coronavirus.
Right, well, I'm a senior, right, and have been for quite a number of years, so I understand that. But I would say to seniors, if you become worried and anxious, use that as the first signal, I'm not really trusting God. My faith has to work for me. If it's not real, what is it really? It's religion. And I'm not into religion, I'm into reality.
A relationship.
A relationship with Jesus Christ. And if it doesn't work for me, why am I doing it?
Graham Bretherick, registered psychologist, president of Run Free Ministries in Lethbridge, and author of The Fear Shift, Dominated by Fear No More. Thanks a lot for joining me today in studio.
You're welcome, Hal. It's a joy and a pleasure.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.